Good morning. To have me twice in 3 weeks, I think is a little bit too much for you, but I apologise. You've got me again, but poor Chris is not able to take the service this morning, and so at 36 hours' notice, I've been asked to do it, and I'm pleased to be with you again. And the theme Jesus as King. Remember last week we had Jesus and the angels. This time we've got Jesus as King. And I think it's taken from the concept in the reading that when the Magi brought gold, gold was an offering for a king. And that's where it comes from. In fact, when you look in the Bible, you don't find Jesus described as king very much. Where was Jesus described as king? On the cross. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. INRI, I-N-R-I. And but he did proclaim himself in a way when he came in triumphal entry into Jerusalem, because the people's mind would flash back to a passage from the prophet saying, "Behold, your king comes riding on a colt." So Jesus is king. And I thought, what can I do? And I apologise to anyone who's heard some of this before, but I need to have the bits that you may have heard before. And if you actually remember me saying these things before, I take that as quite a compliment, in that the average length of retention of a sermon is about how long? How long? It's disappeared before you even finish. Yeah, so have no fear. Okay. I think the kids are all busy with their computers, so we'll address the adults. In my cupboard at home, when I was a child, there was a hat. There was a hat. It belonged to my father, who was commissioned in the Air Force during the war, became an acting squadron leader, and he kept his hat and put it in my wardrobe, and I used as a child to try it on, as I grew up on a diet of Biggles. How many grew up on a diet of Biggles? Who was Biggles? Okay, diet of Biggles. And I used to think, one day I want to wear that hat. And lo and behold, one day I did wear that hat. And I want to tell you a bit of a story about that. But I had the opportunity when I went to university of studying 2 courses. One was medicine and one was becoming a pilot in the Royal Air Force. And it meant quite a lot of extra work, but wow, what an opportunity. So I applied, along with several hundred other people, and did some selection at the Biggin Hill, 3 days officer selection. So it's quite, you know, when you're 17, it's sort of quite stressful. And came out of that, I was selected to join the University of Birmingham Air Squadron and be trained as an RAF pilot, like Biggles. Fantastic. There was a commitment to it. I had to do 4 hours training once a week during term time in theory classes, and I had to go and actually fly airplanes, which meant a long drive and staying, and you might spend a whole day to have 45 minutes of actual instruction. But it was better than reading medical books. At least I felt so at the time. Whether my patients feel that way, I don't know. But anyway, I was selected, and one day I turned up at Royal Air Force Shawbury, and they gave me a pair of flying goggles, genuine Second World War issue, and now I've lost my headphones. Gosh, I always get it wrong. And they gave me a badge to sew on my uniform, and they gave me an aeroplane. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. They said, take that aeroplane, fly it. No, they didn't. They said, we will show you how to fly it. And so this was an RAF Chipmunk, the training plane of the time. It was sort of made to appear something like the sort of Spitfires and things, but didn't go as fast. And I'd spent hours with an instructor, Second World War, Battle of Britain Ace, and he made me do things right. Absolutely, until I could do circuits and landings. And I could do it, and I did it. He said, no, you've got to do it again, and again. And one day he said, you can go solo. And I thought, oh, wow, at last. And I went up, and I suddenly realized, I've got to come down. And so you get a bit lost up there, think, did I pay attention? And one of our trouble as Christians is often we don't pay attention. When we're stuck with the situations which require us to really know what Jesus has told us to do, we think, oh gosh, I wish I'd listened. Is that right? Yeah. And this was the message I got there. Learn well. We don't tolerate slap happy in the Air Force. You fly to very, very high standards. And as Christians, we should fly to high standards. Well, after 100 hours in the air of training and solo flights, and 80 hours, I think it was, of actual sort of book learning, instruction, and passing exams, I eventually received a piece of paper in my logbook. I had to record all my flights, all these dozens of flights. And I got a piece of paper that said I'd passed the training and I was now eligible to receive a commission. Now, what's a commission? Commission's a calling. Commission is something special. A commission entitled me to actually wear my father's hat. And here I am looking very resplendent in borrowed tropical kit in the Libyan desert. That's Tobruk in the background. We'd just flown out there in a plane. And I also received a love letter. Now, I was going out with Jane at the time, but it wasn't from her, so... It's from a lady called Elizabeth. Elizabeth II, who wrote to me and said, by the grace of God of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and her other realms and territories, Queen, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith, here it comes, to our trusty and well-beloved John William Geater. Wow, 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 wow. And this is what Christmas is about. It's God's love letter. But it's not a sloppy love letter. We often make God's love so sloppy and stupid. God's love is like that, well-beloved, trusty. It's a commission. It says, I love you this much. Jesus as King on the cross is the depth of God's love letter to us. But it's also his commission to us. Because the love letter didn't stop at saying, well-beloved, most trusty. It goes on and it says, gives me authority. It says, you are appointed to exercise and well discipline in their duties such officers, airmen and airwomen as may be placed under your orders from time to time. Well, there weren't many placed under my orders at that time, but there might have been had I stayed flying. But it also says you're to obey orders, do as you're instructed, and be dutiful. That's God's love. It's a two-way thing. I love you this much that I'm prepared to entrust you with something. Now, I'm sure I've told some of you at any rate the story of the hat, because, you see, I got this hat, and it was fantastic for the first day or two. All these airmen saluted me. Wow. And then I thought, hey, what am I? I'm a student coming here. I'm having a whale of a time flying airplanes. And here are these proper serving men, some of them having served through the war, saluting me. And it embarrassed me. And so I put the hat in a bag when I arrived at the station and sort of slunk into the crew room and then changed into my pilot kit. And I got summoned to the station commander. And he said, "You were observed improperly dressed." And I thought, oh dear. And he said, "You were not wearing a hat." And I said, "No." And he said, "Would you mind telling me why?" And I said, "Yes, because I'm embarrassed." I said, these guys, they're the real people serving this country. And I'm just so honoured at being able to be part of it. And he said, "They're saluting you. Who on earth would salute you?" They're saluting, look at the badge, the Queen's Commission. Whatever we do, we take no honour. It's what God does through us, and it's an honour to serve him. And so it's the Christian life is a matter of wearing with pride that badge, being proud of the God we serve and being a servant of God. But it's also a matter of having humility to know that that's his authority and not ours. And once personal pride creeps in, we lose that. So the lessons I want to paint to this, if we really acknowledge Jesus as King and obey his call and accept his commission, we have to be chosen. Now, I was selected out of quite a lot of people. My eyesight was good, my reflexes were fast, and they seemed to think I'd be a good pilot. But I was chosen. We are all chosen. If you're here today, God has chosen you. Sadly, there are people out there who God has chosen, but they've chosen not to follow him. I could not understand why anybody in that university would not want to be in the University Air Squadron. It was fantastic. And yet, hundreds of people never even applied. Couldn't understand that. And, we're chosen. You have to be chosen, but God has chosen. It's not his will that any should be lost, but whether you obey the call. Then you have to be trained. It's no good me going and flying an airplane. I can do this. I don't need to listen to this man. What does he know? We have to be trained. Are we willing to submit to that discipline? I had to go every Tuesday night during the university terms and study navigation and meteorology and stuff and how planes work. And, that's an effort, isn't it? I had to pass an exam. And then up in the air, I had to learn to do things really meticulously, doing it alongside somebody who knew what they were doing. That, I think, is where we often go wrong in church. We don't mentor each other. When I was in America, one of the talks that I heard that really impressed me was about being Moses to others Joshua's. That Moses trained Joshua to do what he couldn't do. Are we putting that effort into doing that training? Are we willing to submit to being trained ourselves? Obedient. Wear your hat. Trusting. You trust. You trust when you take a plane off the ground. You trust that the engines work. You trust that the laws of physics will keep going whilst you're up there, so that actually the plane goes up and not down until it's meant to come down. And so you have to trust. Our life should be trust. As Christians, we should be trustworthy. We should be able to rely on each other, because that's the implicit in that commissioning document, that you have to be able to rely on those beneath you and above you to be a functioning unit. Do the things we've been taught. So often we say, oh, it doesn't apply to me. No, Jesus told us how to live life. It's there, it's written down. It's there in his words. In that you've seen me, you've seen the Father, said Jesus. We know how to do it. Paul, in his letters, instructs how the church should look and how it should run. Yeah, we say, oh no, we know better. We know better. If I'd have done things the way I thought rather than the way the instructors thought, I would be dead. And be available. The part of the contract that I had with that commission was that I had to be available to be the first in line to be called up if our country was attacked. We as Christians, we have to be available. God, sometimes we say, oh, nothing's ever happened, he's never given me opportunities. But be available. Have we actually said to him, we're willing to go? We're willing to go. They said to me, how would you like to go to Libya? And I thought, well, that's better. I think Jane claims that I was supposed to be taking her out on our first date that day, but so here I was instead, looking at the engines of this plane that would take me to Libya, and it's pretty powerful. And I said yes, and Jane forgave me. Thank you, Jane. And the thing is, I was allowed to part of the flight to fly that plane. It was an instruction flight. I was sitting in the co-pilot seat, and here I was on the ground, having flown all that way in this huge plane, one of the biggest transport planes in the world. Sorry, I missed that one. And I think this is the thing of the Christian life that people forget. When the King has commissioned us, he gives us power. Gives us power. That huge aeroplane, I think it's the difference of that and that little chipmunk, gives us huge power. And so often we say, oh no, can't do that. Let's take the power of God. When we come to this meeting about the call, let's realize it's not us, it's God. And it's his power and his authority. And we, little me there at 20 years old, sort of Cliff Richard hairstyle, had played a part in bringing that huge plane with all those soldiers on board. And it was 40 years after I received the love letter from Elizabeth before I met her. And then she gave me a medal, not for serving in the Air Force, but for the hard work of many other people in Loaf and Prime and a few other things. And it struck me that the commission from the King of Heaven, actually, what is the ultimate reward? It's when we meet the King of Heaven and he says to us, well done, good and faithful servant. Well done, good and faithful servant. Well done, good and faithful, most trusty and well-beloved servant. That's the King we serve, willing to sacrifice himself for us, but also giving us that immense privilege of serving him. Thank you.